Prince Vasily kept the promise that he had given to Princess Strubetskaya, who had spoken to him on behalf of her only son, Boris, on the evening of Anna Pavlovna's soiree. The matter was mentioned to the emperor, an exception made, and Boris transferred into the regiment of Semenyov guards with the rank of cornet. He received, however, no appointment to Kututsov's staff, despite all Anna Mikhailovna's endeavors and entreaties. Soon after Anna Pavlovna's reception, Anna Mikhailovna returned to Moscow and went straight to her rich relations, the Rostovs, with whom she stayed when in town, and where her darling, Boris, who had only just entered a regiment of the line and was being at once transferred to the guards as a cornet, had been educated from childhood and lived for years at a time. The guards had already left Petersburg on the 10th of August, and her son, who had remained in Moscow for his equipment, was to join them on the march to Radzivilov. It was St. Natalia's Day and the name day of two of the Rostovs, the mother and the youngest daughter, both named Natalie. Ever since the morning, carriages with 6 horses had been coming and going continually, bringing visitors to the Countess Rostova's big horse on the Povarskaya, so well known to all Moscow. The Countess herself and her handsome eldest daughter were in the drawing room with the visitors who came to congratulate and who constantly succeeded one another in relays. The Countess was a woman of about 45, with a thin oriental type of face, evidently worn out with childbearing. She had 12. A languor of motion and speech resulting from weakness gave her a distinguished air with inspired respect. Princess Anna Mikhailovna Drubetskaya, who as a member of the household was also seated in the drawing room, helped to receive and entertain the visitors. The young people were in one of the inner rooms, not considering it necessary to take part in receiving the visitors. The Count met the guests and saw them off, inviting them all to dinner. "I am very, very grateful to you, mon cher, or ma chère," he called everyone without exception, without the slightest variation in his tone. "My dear," whether they were above or below him in rank. "I thank you for myself and for our 2 dear ones whose name days we are keeping. But mind you come to dinner, or I shall be offended, ma chère. On behalf of the whole family, I beg you to come, mon cher." These words he repeated to everyone without exception or variation, and with the same expression on his full, cheerful, clean-shaven face, the same firm pressure of hand, and the same quick, repeated bows. As soon as he had seen a visitor off, he returned to one of those who were still in the drawing-room, drew a chair toward him or her, and jauntily spreading out his legs and putting his hands on his knees, with the air of a man who enjoys life and knows how to live, he swayed to and fro with dignity, offered surmises about the weather, or touched on questions of health, sometimes in Russian and sometimes in very bad but self-confident French. Then again, like a man weary but unflinching in the fulfillment of duty, he rose to see some visitors off, and, stroking his scanty gray hairs over his bald patch, also asked them to dinner. Sometimes on his way back from the anteroom, he would pass through the conservatory and pantry into the large marble dining hall, where tables were being set out for 80 people, and looking at the footmen who were bringing in silver and china, moving tables and unfolding damask table linen, he would call Dmitri Vasilievich a man of good family and the manager of all his affairs, and while looking with the pleasure at the enormous table would say, "Well, Dmitri, you'll see that things are all as they should be?" "That's right. The great thing is the serving, that's it." And with a complacent sigh he would return to the drawing-room. Maria Lovnovna Karinga and her daughter announced the Countess's gigantic footman in his bass voice, entering the drawing-room. The Countess reflected a moment and took a pinch from a gold snuff-box with her husband's portrait on it. "I'm quite worn out by these callers. However, I'll see her more and no more. She is so affected. Ask her in," she said to the footman with a sad voice, as if saying, "Very well, finish me off." A tall, stout, and proud-looking woman with a round-faced, smiling daughter entered the drawing-room, their dresses rustling. "Dear Countess, what an age! She has been laid up, poor child, at the Razumovsky's ball. And Countess Apraxina." "I was so delighted," came the sounds of animated feminine voices, interrupting one another and mingling with the rustling of dresses and the scraping of chairs. Excuse me. Then one of those conversations began which last out until, at the first pause, the guests rise with a rustle of dresses and say, "I am so delighted." Mama's health and Countess Apraxina then, again rustling, pass into the anteroom, put on cloaks or mantles, and drive away. The conversation was on the chief topic of the day, the illness of the wealthy and the celebrated beau of Catherine's day, Count Bezúkhov, and about his illegitimate son Pierre, the one who had behaved so improperly at Anna Pavlovna's reception. "I am so sorry for the poor Count," said the visitor. "He is in such bad health, and now this vexation about his son is enough to kill him." "What is that?" asked the Countess, as if she did not know what the visitor alluded to, though she had already heard about the cause of the Count Bezúkhov's distress some 15 times. "That's what comes of a modern education," exclaimed the visitor. "It seems that while he was abroad this young man was allowed to do as he liked, and now in Petersburg, I hear, he has been doing such terrible things that he has been expelled by the police." "You don't say so," replied the Countess. "He chose his friends badly," interposed Anna Mikhailovna. "Prince Vasily's son, he and a certain Dulukhov have, it is said, been up to heaven only knows what, and they have had to suffer for it. Dulukhov has been degraded to the ranks, and Bezúkhov's son sent back to Moscow. Anatole Kuragin, father, managed to somehow get his son's affair hushed up, but even he was ordered out of Petersburg." "But what have they been up to?" asked the Countess. "They are regular brigands, especially Dulukhov," replied the visitor. "He is a son of Maria Ivanovna Dulukhova, such a worthy woman. But there it is, just fancy. Those three got hold of a bear somewhere, put it in a carriage, and set off with it to visit some actresses. The police tried to interfere, and what did the young men do? They tied a policeman and the bear back to back and put the bear into the Moika Canal, and there was the bear swimming about with the policeman on his back. What a nice figure the policeman must have cut, my dear, shouted the Count, dying with laughter. Oh, how dreadful! How could you laugh at it, Count? Yet the ladies themselves could not help laughing. It was all they could do to rescue the poor man, continued the visitor, and to think it is Cyril Vladimirovich Bezukhov's son who amuses himself in this sensible manner. And he was said to be so well educated and clever. This is all that his foreign education has done for him. I hope that here in Moscow no one will receive him in spite of his money. They wanted to introduce him to me, but I quite declined. I have my daughter to consider. Why do you say this young man is so rich? Asked the Countess, turning away from the girls, who at once assumed an air of inattention. His children are all illegitimate. I think Pierre is also illegitimate. The visitor made a gesture with her hand. I should think he has a score of them. Princess Anna Mikhailovna intervened in the conversation, evidently wishing to show her connections and knowledge of what went on in society. The fact of the matter is, she said significantly, and also in a half-whisper, everyone knows Count Cyril's reputation. He has lost count of his children, but Pierre was his favorite. How handsome the old man was still only a year ago, remarked the Countess. I have never seen such a handsomer man. He is very much altered now, said Anna Mikhailovna. Well, as I was saying, Prince Vasily is the next heir, through his wife, but the Count is very fond of Pierre, looked after his education, and wrote to the Emperor about him, so that in the case of his death, and he is so ill that he may die at any moment, and Dr. Lorrain has come from Petersburg, no one knows who will inherit his immense fortune, Pierre or Prince Vasily. 40,000 serfs and millions of rubles. I know it all very well, for Prince Vasily told me himself. Besides, Cyril Vladimirovich is my mother's second cousin. He is also my Boris's grandfather, she added, as if she attached no importance at all to the fact. Prince Vasily arrived in Moscow yesterday. I hear he has some inspection business, remarked the visitor. Yes, but between ourselves, said the princess, that is a pretext. The fact is, he has come to see Count Cyril Vladimirovich, hearing how ill he is. But do you know, my dear, that was a capital joke, said the Count, and seeing that the elder visitor was not listening, he turned to the young ladies. I can just imagine what a funny figure that policeman cut. And as he waved his arms to impersonate the policeman, his portly form again shook with a deep, ringing laugh, the laugh of one who always eats well, and in particular drinks well. So do come and dine with us, he said. Silence ensued. The Countess looked at her callers, smiling affably, but not concealing the fact that she would not be distressed if they now rose and took their leave. The visitor's daughter was already smoothing down her dress with an inquiring look at her mother, when suddenly from the next room were heard the footsteps of boys and girls running to the door, and the noise of a chair falling over, and a girl of 13, hiding something in the folds of her short muslin frock, darted in and stopped short in the middle of the room. It was evident that she had not intended her flight to bring her so far. Behind her in the doorway appeared a student with a crimson coat collar, an officer of the guards, a girl of 15, and a plump, rosy-faced boy in a short jacket. The Count jumped up and, swaying from side to side, spread his arms wide and threw them round the little girl who had run in. "Ah, there she is," he exclaimed, laughing. "My pet, whose name day it is, my dear pet." "Ma chère, there is a time for everything," said the Countess with feigned severity. "You spoiler, Ilya," she added, turning to her husband. "How do you do, my dear? I wish you many happy returns of your name day," said the visitor. "What a charming child," she added, addressing the mother. This black-eyed, wide-mouthed girl, not pretty but full of life, with childish bare shoulders which after her run heaved and shook her bodice, with black curls tossed backward, thin bare arms, little legs in lace-frilled drawers, and feet in low slippers, was just at that charming age when a girl is no longer a child, though a child is not yet a young woman. Escaping from her father, she ran to hide her flushed face in the lace of her mother's mantilla, not paying the least attention to her severe remark, and began to laugh. She laughed, and in her fragmentary sentences tried to explain about a doll which she produced from the folds of her frock. "Do you see my doll, Mimi, you see," was all Natasha managed to utter. To her, everything seemed funny. She leaned against her mother and burst into a loud, ringing fit of laughter that even the prim visitor could not help joining in. "Now then, go away and take your monstrosity with you," said the mother, pushing away her daughter with pretended sternness, and turning to the visitor, she added, "She is my youngest girl." Natasha, raising her face for a moment from her mother's mantilla, glanced up at her through tears of laughter, and again hid her face. The visitor, compelled to look on at this family scene, thought it necessary to take some part in it. "Tell me, my dear," she said to Natasha, "is Mimi a relation of yours? A daughter, I suppose?" Natasha did not like the visitor's tone of condescension to the childish things. She did not reply, but looked at her seriously. Meanwhile, the younger generation, Boris, the officer, Anna Mikhailovna's son, Nicholas, the undergraduate, the Count's eldest son, Sonia, the Count's 15-year-old niece, and little Petya, his youngest boy, had all settled down in the drawing-room and were obviously trying to restrain within the bounds of decorum the excitement and mirth that shone in all their faces. Evidently in the back rooms from which they had dashed out so impetuously, the conversation had more amusing than the drawing-room talk of society scandals, the weather, and Countess Apraxina. Now and then they glanced at one another, hardly able to suppress their laughter. The two young men, the student and the officer, friends from childhood, were of the same age and both handsome fellows, though not alike. Boris was tall and fair. His calm and handsome had regular, delicate features. Nicholas was short with curly hair and an open expression. Dark hairs were already showing on his upper lip, and his whole face expressed impetuous, whoa, I'm going to skip that word, and enthusiasm. Impetuosity, Nicholas blushed when he entered the drawing room. He evidently tried to find something to say, but failed. Boris, on the contrary, at once found his footing, and related quietly and humorously how he had known that doll Mimi when she was still quite a young lady, before her nose was broken, how she aged during the 5 years he had known her, and how her head had cracked right across the skull. Having said this, he glanced at Natasha. She turned away from him and glanced at her younger brother, who was screwing up his eyes and shaking with suppressed laughter and unable to control himself any longer. She jumped up and rushed the room as fast as her nimble little feet would carry her. Boris did not laugh. "You were meaning to go out, weren't you, Mama? Do you want the carriage?" he asked his mother with a smile. Yes, go and tell them to get it ready," she answered, returning a smile. Boris quietly left the room and went in search of Natasha. The plump boy ran after them rather angrily, as if vexed that the program had been disturbed. The only young people remaining in the drawing room, not counting the young lady visitor and the Countess's eldest daughter, who was 4 years older than her sister and behaved already like a grown-up person, were Nicholas and Sonia, the niece. Sonia was a slender little brunette with a tender look in her eyes, which were veiled by long lashes, thick black plaits coiling twice around her head, and a tawny tint in her complexion, and especially in the color of her slender but graceful and muscular arms and neck. By the grace of her movements, by the softness and flexibility of her small limbs, and by a certain coyness and reserve of a manner, she reminded one of a pretty, half-grown kitten which promises to become a beautiful little cat. She evidently considered it proper to show an interest in the general conversation by smiling, but, in spite of herself, her eyes under the thick long lashes watched her cousin, who was going to join the army, with such a passionate, girlish adoration that her smile could not for a single instant impose upon anyone, and it was clear that the kitchen had settled down only to spring up with more energy and again play with her cousin as soon as they could, like Natasha and Boris escaped from the drawing room. "Ah, yes, my dear," said the Count, addressing the visitor and pointing to Nicholas. His friend Boris had come, an officer, and so for friendship's sake he is leaving the university, and me, his old father, and entering the military service, my dear. And there was a place and everything waiting for him at the archives department. "Isn't that friendship?" remarked the Count in an inquiring tone. "But they say that war has been declared." replied the visitor. "They've been saying that a long while," said the Count, "and they'll say so again and again, and that will be the end of it. My dear, there's friendship for you," he repeated, he's joining the Hussars. The visitor, not knowing what to say, shook her head. "It's not at all from friendship," declared Nicholas, flaring up and turning away as if from a shameful aspersion. "It is not from friendship at all. I simply feel that the army is my vocation." He glanced at his cousin and the young lady visitor, and they were both regarding him with a smile of approbation. "Schubert, the colonel of the Pavlograd Hussars, is dining with us today. He has been here on leave and is taking Nicholas back with him. It can't be helped," said the Count, shrugging his shoulders and speaking playfully of a matter that evidently distressed him. "I have already told you, Papa," said his son, "that if you don't wish to let me go, I'll stay. But I know I am no use anywhere except in the army. I am not a diplomat or a government clerk. I don't know how to hide what I feel." As he spoke, he kept glancing with the flirtatiousness of a handsome youth at Sonia and the young lady visitor. The little kitten, feasting her eyes on him, seemed ready at any moment to start her gambols again and display her kittenish nature. All right," said the old count. "He always flares up. This Bonaparte has turned all their heads. They all think of how he rose from an ensign and became emperor. Well, God grant it," he added, not noticing his visitor's sarcastic smile. The elders began talking about Bonaparte. Julie Karingina turned to the young Rostov. "What a pity you weren't at the Arkarovs on Thursday. It was so dull without you," said she, giving him a tender smile. The young man, flattered, sat down nearer to her with a coquettish smile, and engaged the smiling Julie in a confidential conversation without at all noticing his involuntary smile had stabbed the heart of Sonia, who blushed and smiled unnaturally. In the midst of his talk, he glanced round at her. She gave him a passionately angry glance, and hardly able to restrain her tears and maintain the artificial smile on her lips, she got up and left the restroom. All Nicholas's animation vanished. He waited for the first pause in the conversation, and then, with a distressed face, left the room to find Sonia. "How plainly all these young people wear their hearts on their sleeves," said Anna Mikhailovna, pointing to Nicholas as he went out. "Cousinage, dangereux voisinage." Cousinhood is a dangerous neighborhood, she added. "Yes," said the Countess, with the brightness these young people had brought into the room had vanished. When the brightness of these young people had brought into the room had vanished, and as if answering a question no one had put, but which was always in her mind. "And how much suffering, how much anxiety one has had to go through that we might rejoice in them now. And yet really the anxiety is greater now than the joy. One is always anxious, especially just at this age, so dangerous both for the girls and boys." "It all depends on the bringing up," remarked the visitor. "Yes, you're quite right," continued the Countess. "Till now I have always, thank God, been my children's friend and had their full confidence," said she, repeating the mistake of so many parents who imagine that their children have no secrets from them. "I know I shall always be my daughter's first confidant, and that if Nicholas, with his impulsive nature, does get into mischief, boy can't help it. He will all the same never be like those young Petersburg young men." "Yes, they are splendid youngsters," chimed in the Count, who had always solved questions that seemed to him perplexing by deciding that everything was splendid. "Just fancy, wants to be a hussar. What's one to do, my dear?" "What a charming young creature your younger girl is," said the visitor. "A little volcano." "Yes, a regular volcano," said the Count. "Takes after me. And what a voice she has, though she's my daughter. I tell the truth when I say she'll be a singer, a second Salomone. We have engaged an Italian to give her lessons." "Isn't she too young? I have heard that it harms the voice to train at that age." "Oh, no, not at all too young," replied the Count. "Why, our mothers used to be married at 12 or 13. "And she's in love with Boris already. Just fancy," said the Countess, with a gentle smile, looking at Boris's mother, and then went on, evidently concerned with a thought that always occupied her. "Now, you see, if I were to be severe with her and to forbid it, goodness knows what they might be up to on the sly." She meant that they would be kissing. "But, as it is, I know every word she utters. She will come running to me of her own accord in the evening and tell me everything. Perhaps I spoil her, but really that seems to be the best plan. With her elder sister, I was stricter. Yes, I was brought up quite differently, remarked the handsome elder daughter, Countess Vera, with a smile. But the smile did not enhance Vera's beauty, as smiles generally do. On the contrary, it gave her an unnatural and therefore unpleasant expression. Vera was good-looking, not at all stupid, quick at learning, as was well brought up, and had a pleasant voice. What she said was true and appropriate, yet strange to say, everyone, the visitors and the Countess alike, turned to look at her as if wondering why she had said it, and they all felt awkward. People are always too clever with their eldest children and try to make something exceptional of them, said the visitor. What's the good of denying it, my dear? Our dear Countess was too clever with Vera, said the Count. Well, what of that? She's turned out splendidly all the same, he added, winking at Vera. The guests got up and took their leave, promising a return to dinner. What manners! I thought they would never go, said the Countess, when she had seen her guests out. When Natasha ran out of the drawing room, she only went as far as the conservatory. There she paused and stood listening to the conversation in the drawing room, waiting for Boris to come out. She was already growing impatient and stamped her foot, ready to cry at his not coming at once, when she heard the young man's discreet steps approaching neither quickly nor slowly. At this, Natasha dashed swiftly among the flower tubs and hid there. Boris paused in the middle of the room, looked around, brushed a little dust from the sleeve of his uniform, and going up to a mirror examined his handsome face. Natasha was about to call him, but changed her mind. Let him look for me, thought she. Hardly had Boris gone than Sonia, flushed in tears and muttering so angrily, came in at the other door. Natasha checked her first impulse to run out to her and remained in her hiding place, watching under an invisible cap to see what went on in the world. She was experiencing a new and a peculiar pleasure. Sonia, muttering to herself, kept looking round toward the drawing-room door. It opened, and Nicholas came in. "Sonia, what's the matter with you? How can you?" said she, running up to her. "It's nothing. Leave me alone," sobbed Sonia. I know what it is." "Well, if you do, so much the better, and you can go back to her." "Sonia, look here. How can you torture me and yourself like that for a mere fancy?" said Nicholas, taking her hand. Sonia did not pull it away and left off crying. Natasha, not stirring and scarcely breathing, watched from her ambush with sparkling eyes. What will happen now, thought she. Sonia, what is anyone in the world to me? You are alone. Everything, said Nicholas. And I will prove it to you. I don't like you when you talk. Oh my God. I don't like you to talk like that. Well then, I won't. Only forgive me, Sonia. He drew her to him and kissed her. Oh, how nice, thought Natasha. When Sonia and Nicholas had gone out of the conservatory, she had followed and called Boris to her. Boris, come here, she said with a sly and significant look. I have something to tell you. Here. She had led him into the conservatory to the place among the tubs where she had been hiding. Boris followed her, smiling. What is the something? Asked he.